been waiting for has now finally arrived.
From knockouts to tap-outs.
It's all over!
Inside the octagon and beyond.
Is this not real now? Are we pretending?
Well, rich, baby. Break out the red panties.
This is the MMA Report with John Pollock.
Unbelievable! Here we go!
Welcome to another edition of the MMA Report. I'm John Pollock. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for downloading the show. Thank you for finding the MMA Report. Pleasure to be with you all. You know, it is International Fight Week, and it dawned on me today that this very show launched the week of the big July card back in 2012. It was before it was marketed as International Fight Week. At this point, it was just the big 4th of July weekend card. But we launched early July 2012. It was the week of the rematch between Anderson Silva and Chael Sonnen. And here we are. All these years later, folks, still all together. Still getting set for a pair of big cards this weekend as the UFC will be in Las Vegas Friday and Saturday night. We've got the Hall of Fame ceremony that's happening, for most of you listening, it's happening tonight. And I'm looking forward to it. It's streaming on Fight Pass. They have made the smart move of moving this Hall of Fame from Sunday during the day to Thursday night, putting it on Fight Pass, where I feel it's going to have a way more attention. I just felt it was buried on Sunday. As someone that, I was there last year covering the shows, and having it on Sunday, no person is staying an extra day in Las Vegas to cover the Hall of Fame. So it always made more sense to me to put this during the week. And the fact that Thursday night you don't have a third card like you did last year, I just feel that as well was what a taxing week that was. And not to don't shed any tears for me here, but last year that fight week was one of the most insanity-filled ones I can recall of a fight week, because not only did you have the cards on back-to-back nights leading into UFC 200, but you also had all of the drama involving Jon Jones failing his drug test, the fight being taken off briefly, and then Anderson Silva inserted at the last minute to fight Daniel Cormier in a non-title fight. And that whole deal went down. Media was alerted on the Wednesday night, and we go to cover this press conference with Dana White announcing that Jones is out. The following day, we go and Jon Jones holds his own press conference with Malki Kawa and his crisis management expert, whose name is escaping me right now, but she shared some instructions for the media in terms of her thoughts on the character of Jon Jones and not to go out and crucify this man. However, Jon Jones has moved on. He has since, alluded to his failures, made some lighthearted remarks about them. And now we've got a rematch between the two coming up in just a few weeks. So all has turned out for one Jon Jones. However, the day of that press conference, you had weigh-ins going on for the Friday night card. Thursday night featured that Fight Pass card where Eddie Alvarez defeated Rafael Dos Anjos for the lightweight title. And yeah, it was just one of those weeks where it was just one thing after the other, and my head was spinning by the end of that trip. And then I come home on Sunday, and late Sunday night, if you recall, that's when the Las Vegas news outlet was the first to report the sales gone down with WME IMG purchasing the UFC. And then that whole next week was crazy as well. I had to do a bunch of interviews at that time. I don't think this week will come anywhere close to the 7 days of news that surrounded that entire UFC 200 card, which is one of the stranger cards you go back and look on. It just felt like this weird fog by the end of it. UFC 200, it was a loaded card. I don't think it was possible to meet people's expectations. And you just left with kind of a bit of a sour taste weeks later when you had the Brock Lesnar drug test come out. That got turned to a no contest. A year ago, we were talking about the idea of Brock Lesnar coming back, doing another fight. That guy was so happy at that press conference after he beat Mark Hunt. Like, you never see Brock Lesnar on that level of just happiness. He's a very quiet individual, And at that press conference, you could tell this is what this guy loves. I'm sure he gets a lot of enjoyment out of professional wrestling. He makes a lot of money doing professional wrestling several times a year. He does only a few scattered matches throughout the year. And I'm sure there's an enjoyment that comes with that. But to me, him fighting, that is that guy's passion. That is what that guy loves to do. And I think if he was younger, I think that's what he would have continued. And it's going to bring about the same questions as 2015 did when his newest WWE contract is up early next year. It'll be up around March of next year. And granted, he is now retired. He would have to enter that testing pool. And my gut says he doesn't fight again, but I don't rule it out completely. He's going to be 40 by that point. And you just have to wonder that if you're Brock Lesnar, and you're going into a negotiating period with the WWE, what is your leverage? It's not going to be any other wrestling company. It's going to be the UFC. It's going to be fighting. And that could be really interesting for Brock Lesnar, whose birthday actually is next week. Turns 40 next week. I mean, the fact that he's a heavyweight, 40 years old, is not a disqualifier when it comes to heavyweight MMA, even in the UFC. That Brock Lesnar, with that wrestling base, whether you want to put an asterisk or not next to that win over Mark Hunt, I mean, he controlled Mark Hunt. He controlled him for 3 rounds, and that was off of a training camp where he hadn't fought since 2011. We fast forward to this week's series of events. On the card today, on the MMA Report card, we're going to be joined by Justin Gaethje. He's making his UFC debut on Friday night, headlining against Michael Johnson, which, when you look at the fights happening between Friday and Saturday night, that is right near the top of the list. That could be the fight of the weekend. It's a great fight. It's a great showcase for Justin Gaethje, not in the sense this is a showcase fight, but he's being placed in a main event spotlight. And had he been thrown on the UFC 213 card, he's on the prelims. He's on the televised prelims, and he's probably not even headlining the televised prelims. He'd be in a spot similar to Marlon Moraes a couple of weeks back in Rio de Janeiro, taking on Rafael Sunsao. Instead, Justin Gaethje has got all of the attention. He was part of that Dallas press conference, which, yes, a lot of focus was on Kevin Lee and Michael Chiesa, but not far behind were those two going back and forth. They had a media day last week where Michael Johnson is on camera. They're walking down the hallway and Johnson's just chirping away at him. Forget all the trash talk. It's a great fight from two extraordinary lightweights, and Justin Gaethje has the ability, if he beats Michael Johnson, to immediately make an impact in the top 10 of that 155-pound division. We don't know what's happening with the top of the division, but we'll get into that with Justin Gaethje, what he thinks is going to be the next step for the lightweights and his fight with Michael Johnson. So he's going to be joining us in just a couple of minutes, and then it's a big, deep dive into all of the fights that are happening this weekend at both the Ultimate Fighter finale Friday night and UFC 213 with Fight Network's own Cody Saftic, who will be joining me as usual. So heavy focus on International Fight Week today. Once again, I mentioned the Hall of Fame. If you're tuning in on Thursday night, you've got Kazushi Sakuraba going in, Maurice Smith, Joe Silva, and Uriah Faber. Absent this year is the fight induction. In prior years, they've included a singular fight that they have inducted in. In this one, they have opted to go with 2 pioneer candidates with Kazushi Sakuraba and Maurice Smith. And then you have the modern performer in Uriah Faber, and then Joe Silva in kind of your builders category. And I'm really hoping we get a speech from Joe Silva, who is someone that is notoriously silent. Not a guy that you often see engage in any interviews. I know that the UFC, they did some matchmaker videos with himself and Sean Shelby over the last few years before his departure. I remember he did a thing with USA Today for a big special, but it's pretty few and far between. And to be honest, I mean, I want to hear a Joe Silva speech. More than anything, I want to hear Joe Silva do a lengthy sit-down interview, because that's a better environment to hear from Joe Silva and not at a podium addressing an audience that's being streamed on Fight Pass. I mean, I don't think you're going to peel back too many layers in that kind of a setting, but I do hope at some point Joe Silva, I mean, he's done. He's finished. I don't think he's ever coming back to MMA in any capacity. That I hope one day he at least does that interview. Can't expect a book out of the guy, but who knows? He's got the time. He could do it if he wanted to. He's a fascinating figure and one that is a guy that everyone in the industry knows the name, but I don't know how many truly appreciate the influence he had. And Dave Meltzer wrote a great bio on Joe Silva not all that long ago in the Wrestling Observer newsletter. I think there was also a piece on MMA fighting. And you just go back to his improbable start with the UFC, randomly calling up Campbell McLaren, and Campbell McLaren happening to answer the phone. And Joe Silva, he's working at an arcade and just throwing out ideas. And he ended up getting in this strange way and then eventually got hired as the matchmaker per the recommendation of Tito Ortiz when Dana White and the Fertittas bought the company. And you had Joe Silva, instrumental during those years, coming in a very improbable fashion. I mean, that just wouldn't happen today. And then being one of the key constructs behind the Ultimate Fighter. It was Joe Silva's vision for that style of show, picking out the fighters that thought would have the most relevancy on the show. And I mean, you take away Ultimate Fighter, that to me is a house of cards. The whole thing falls apart if that doesn't take off to the degree that it did. You didn't just have the ability to bring in a lot of talented fighters, but you had the right personality mix, because it could have been a whole season of great fights. But if you didn't have Bobby Southworth and Josh Koscheck with Chris Lieben, it doesn't have the same magic. It doesn't have that show that does 2 million viewers for a taped episode mid-season as it did for the Josh Koscheck, Chris Lieben fight. And of course, you look ahead to the finale, and that's what gets so much of the attention. But it was that mid-season fight and feud that truly lit Ultimate Fighter on fire. And a lot of that was just luck and timing, and it turned out to be great. But Joe Silva was a big part of that. Kazushi Sakuraba going into the Hall of Fame, that's really great when you talk about someone that, I mean, through his run of the Gracies, that was a transformative series of fights for the Pride Fighting Championships. There was the win over Hoyler in November of 1999. That kind of set the stage here of a Gracie losing. I mean, that was something unique at the time. And then opening it up to Sakuraba and Royce Gracie, which to me was such a pivotal fight at that time. Part of the Open Grand Prix, a legendary fight in MMA history. Forget Pride, of those two going 90 minutes and finally the towel being thrown in. And Sakuraba then goes on to fight Igor Vovchanchin later in the night, part of that tournament. I mean, that was a legacy maker for him that night in 2000. And from there was the Henzo fight. There was the Hyan Gracie fight. And of course, the series of fights with Vanderlei Silva. I mean, that was what was a feud where you could go to the Tokyo Dome and fill the dome off the back of Kazushi Sakuraba, the Japanese hero fighting off the foreign menaces, that one being Vanderlei Silva. And it's a career that I don't know will ever be duplicated in the world of regulated mixed martial arts. Certainly, you're never going to see a 90-minute fight like you did with Royce Gracie, nor are you going to see someone so undersized fighting the likes of which Kazushi Sakuraba did during that time period for Pride. But taking Sakuraba out of the Pride Fighting Championships algorithm, it's a totally different promotion, and it's not as successful as it was. You needed that Japanese superstar. He was that guy. And this week, there's a great piece up on Bleacher Report from Jonathan Snowden going through the history of the Pride Fighting Championships that I would recommend you go check out. It's an excellent piece. Jonathan Snowden is a tremendous writer. If you haven't read any of his books in the past, one of the great writers in MMA, in my opinion. So those are some interesting highlights going into the Hall of Fame. And at this point, we're going to welcome in Justin Gaethje. 10-0 during his World Series of Fighting run. He leaves as their lightweight champion, having never lost the title, an undefeated lightweight, walking into the UFC for the first time Friday night as he will take on Michael Johnson in the main event of the Ultimate Fighter finale. That is up next here on the MMA Report.
Hey, I perform under the big lights, so July 7th, Michael is going to oblige my wish to come in there and give me a war. So that's all I got to say right now. Once I get to fight, then I'll have more to say.
Listen, Justin, you had wars in World Series, but when you come over to the UFC, you won't have a war with me, man. So it's all right. We're gonna bang. Don't get it wrong, but you're out of your league on this one, buddy.
He's right. If I wasn't a Division I All-American,
This isn't wrestling.
if I couldn't kick your leg off, if I couldn't break you
This isn't wrestling.
in any way,
You can be a D1
every way,
how you want to.
I ain't here to talk shit. Hey,
It's
I
not talking
do my
shit.
talking in the cage. That's all I care about. I'm preparing right now, and I'm a violent motherfucker. I'm the most violent lightweight on this planet, and I will prove that.
No,
That's
you're
it. You're gonna
speaking
find
to
out.
the most violent
You're gonna
lightweight on
find
the
out.
planet. Trust me.
It's gonna be a march to deep water, baby, and you ain't not gonna last. You cannot swim in this water.
Deep water. Don't. I don't need to swim. I do all my fighting on land, player.
Welcome back, everybody. It is John Pollock here with you on the MMA Report. Very big weekend for the UFC. 2 big cards, all part of International Fight Week. And Friday night, it's the Ultimate Fighter finale, headlined by lightweights Michael Johnson and the man that joins us now, the undefeated debuting Justin Gaethje is with us. Justin, how is Las Vegas?
Oh, it's fantastic. I love competing here. I've been coming here to wrestle since I was about 6 years old, so it's a culmination of events in my life, and I'm excited to be here.
Does it feel different being part of a UFC fight week, or is it generally not as different as maybe you anticipated coming into this week?
I didn't anticipate much. It's really all about how you handle it yourself. Definitely more fans, which I really enjoy. More interviews, which I enjoy. And once the fight starts, it's me, Michael, and a referee. So no difference there.
I would say looking at both cards, either night, to me, this is right near the top of the list. I love the fact that you guys are headlining your own card. I think having 5 rounds, I think that this is one of the big fights of the entire weekend. Were you anticipating this level of an opponent coming in? Because this is an opportunity for you in your very first UFC fight to create a lot of damage in those rankings and make an immediate impact against a guy the level of Michael Johnson.
Yeah, it's exactly what I asked for. I wanted to start as high as I can. I'm coming, I want to be the best in the world, obviously, and you got to go through people that are ranked high for that. Michael Johnson is number 5 in the world. He's a tough challenge, a great challenge, the challenge that I wanted. So yeah, I'm excited that the UFC trusts in my skills, my effort, and gave me this headlining spot because I'm ready to put my skills to showcase in front of the world.
How do you feel handling everything at the press conference last week at the media day? Do you think he is actively trying to draw you into an emotional fight? Do you get that sense from him and just being around him as much as you've had to in the lead up to this fight?
Yeah, I think, I see it as false confidence on his part. I don't know why he thinks this is a game for some reason. I don't think it's a game. I don't think, I don't talk a lot of crap. But once I get in the cage, I'm larger than life, and he knows that. He knows the pressure I'm going to bring. He knows the task that he has at hand. If he doesn't get lucky and knock me out in the first couple of minutes, he knows he's going to have to really dig deep and try to pull something out of his ass and try to come through because I put pressure on people that they cannot understand. He thinks he understands what's about to happen, but first time I kick him, first time I put my hands on him, he's going to definitely be in for a rude awakening.
When you stated at the Dallas press conference the fact that you wanted to take him into deep waters, you were adamant that you wanted this to be a war. Do you think that rang true to him? Do you feel that was kind of a tipping point for him, being so close to you and hearing, you were a guy, your confidence really came through to me at that press conference of the style of fight you want to have with this guy?
Yeah, as a fighter, you always hope for a quick knockout, but I think that's you definitely can't go in there with the mindset that that's going to happen. I prepared for 25 minutes. I've been preparing for 25-minute fights for 2 years now, as far as with World Series of Fighting and having the belt. So I'm ready for this. I don't know what his tactics are trying to be. he's trying to build himself up and get himself more fans, but he's really doing what he's doing is detrimental to what he's trying to do, I guess.
Did it catch you off guard, his words that he had for you at that press conference? And how personal did you take it? Because I saw a lot of guys up there. Everyone wants to put a spotlight on their fight. Do you feel that was kind of his motivation as well?
Yeah, I think that was his intent for sure. But this is not a game to me. So if you watch me fight, if you've ever seen me fight before, there's no talk needed. When you see me fight on Friday, people are going to love me. People are going to love the effort. I give you effort. What else can you ask for when I step in the cage?
Were you surprised at all that the UFC was able to get footage of your prior fights? They've included you in a lot of the build up to this fight. They even put up a short video today on YouTube. And I mean, if there's one thing you can say, Justin Gaethje is a highlight reel performer, and it's incredible some of the footage they have. And sometimes with fighters coming over from promotions, that's not an option. I'm really glad that they were able to reach that deal with World Series.
Yeah, me too. I don't know the logistics of things like that, so I really have no idea. But I treated every single person with respect at World Series, and them giving them footage helps me. So I definitely didn't think it'd be a problem. They probably had to pay for it, but who knows? I don't know.
When you last fought on New Year's Eve, did you believe you were leaving that cage for World Series for the last time, or when did it become apparent to you that you would be leaving?
No, not right away. I thought, I had one more fight of my contract, so I was expecting to fight maybe one more time, but as soon as I knew that my contract was going to expire before I got the fight, then, I was so excited. I've been saying I'm the best in the world for a while. I felt like a coward every time I said it because I wasn't in a position to fight the best in the world. 17-0, I wasn't ready at 13-0. I wasn't, as far as octagon jitters, I think that comes into play whenever you don't have the experience that you feel that you might need. I'm prepared. I'm so prepared for this. I've been wrestling since I was 4. I've only been fighting for about 5 or 6 years, but I got a great coach, Trevor Whitman. So, it's a process, man. There's no reason to rush this process.
You mentioned Trevor Whitman. Tell me a bit about the chemistry you have with Trevor, because it's very apparent how well you two work off one another, and that's such a key relationship for a fighter. What is it specific about Trevor that brings out the best in you?
He's so positive, and he's been around the game for so long, so I really I believe when he says that I got the skills and technique to go as far as I want. He speaks from experience. He's been around a lot of top fighters, and he's so positive. He's got a smile on his face constantly. During the winter, I go with him and his wife. I go snowboarding every Thursday. So yeah, we got a great relationship, in and outside of the gym.
When you were up here in Toronto last December, you were with your teammate Matthew Lopez. He was fighting here at UFC 206. Just being around a UFC event, and I'm sure you've been to many, was that always something for you that was a goal that you felt at some point in my career, I'm going to be competing here? Yeah.
There wasn't even a question. Especially if I kept winning. I knew that this is the path that I started, a long time ago. And I knew that I would be here eventually. I would be a coward, like I said, if I tried to stay away from here. It's a numbers game. I wanted to build my brand, and I wanted to be worth the most when I came over here. So I took advantage of that.
And is not looking beyond Michael Johnson, but the UFC lightweight division, it is one of the deepest in the sport, but there's a lot of confusion at the top. You have a lightweight champion that is going off to box. There's a lot of different question marks. As you look at the lightweight division, are you kind of looking at this state of things of what is your goal? Because you're obviously looking towards the top of the division in rather quick fashion.
Yeah, I'm here because it's always been one at a time. I know if I beat Michael Johnson, I'll get another higher ranked opponent. That's a given. So I'm just prepared for this fight. And there's obviously some open ends when it comes to this division. So my goal is to get the interim belt around my waist. And if what's his name ever wants to come back, then he has to fight the guy with the interim belt, I hope.
Well, we're looking forward to this. As I said, Justin, I think this is one of the best fights happening this weekend. It's going down Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern time on FS1. If you're in Canada, it's airing on TSN5 right across the country. All the best, Justin. Looking forward to this one against Michael Johnson.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Thank you for the time.
It is International Fight Week, joined here by Cody Saftic, and let us get to the meat of the subject. Cody, we have followed Tough all season long,
Yes.
You and I to the bitter end, and at the beginning of the season, I was backing James Krause, you backed Jesse Taylor, and you are the victor of this show, at least.
Yeah, I mean, size really does make a difference.
It made
sometimes.
a gigantic difference in this fight. Like, this was a dominant win by Jesse Taylor, and I'm definitely favoring him in this finale on Friday night.
Yeah, I didn't really agree with Dana White's assessment of like the style you need to beat Taylor. I think you need just a red hot submission game. You got to catch this guy coming in. But he said, you need takedown defense and you need to have good striking and beat him up. But when you're half his size, it's increasingly difficult. And here's the thing with Jesse Taylor that I really started to notice is that he's full autopilot when he's in there. It's just his body. He's been in there so many ringers. He's been in so many battles that his body just goes into cruise control. He knows how to throw a couple punches, shoot that takedown. If he doesn't get the first takedown attempt, he chain wrestles. And that's the thing you notice in these fights. He just keeps chaining submission or wrestling attempts together, takedown attempts until something sticks. In this fight, James Krause had a good game plan here. Get the takedown on Jesse Taylor before he can get it on you. He gets the takedown, and immediately he just scrambles into a favorable position, gets the takedown. Now, Krause says after the end of the fight, he apologizes to Zach Cummings and Tim Elliott. He's like, I was so tired. And he says, I didn't feel myself. What it was is he had a guy twice his size grinding him for the first 5 minutes.
Those submission attempts Krause tried to make, he was just immediately stacked, and it was a huge size discrepancy in this fight. And I mean, it goes to the point you made about Krause, the fact that this was not some middleweight coming down. This was a lightweight going up. And Jesse Taylor is a guy that has fought very well at 185 pounds in the past. This is a big welterweight.
Yeah, big welterweight. I mean, I mentioned that he's got one fight in the UFC against CB Dollaway. Well, CB Dollaway is now fighting in the UFC at 205 pounds, and Jesse Taylor's not out of place next to a guy like that. I mean, only 5'11", but he packs as much muscle as you could possibly pack on his frame, and he knows how to go out there and employ his game plan. And I'm a guy who's really interested in stats, so I found this actually quite funny, but I want to write it out here.
This is the first time you've brought notes to the game.
I never bring notes, but there was so much to write down that I was just like, wow. But a 45 fight veteran, right? And when people say, oh, this guy's a seven-time Strikeforce veteran, he's a 3-time Bellator veteran, a 9-time UFC veteran. He doesn't have any of that. He's actually never fought for the same promotion more than 3 times. But he's a 14-country veteran. He's fought in 14 different countries. 7-0 in tough competition. That makes him the winningest tough competitor of all times, right?
You could argue, and then we'll get back to your stats, that as much as this season has been about how this guy screwed up his career on Tough, had he not been the wild guy that got thrown off, I think that added to his interest level. Had this guy just gone to the finals, that's all great. He could have had a UFC career, but by going out, he was always that name that people identify as this guy that got thrown off of Tough.
Yeah.
And you could always throw on a card for any promotion that's trying to get some traction, throw on Jesse Taylor. And that's what this guy made a whole career out of doing.
Yeah. And to that point, he fought, as I mentioned, he's never fought for a promotion more than 3 times. He competed for Strikeforce twice. KSW twice. The MFC in Alberta twice. The World Series of Fighting twice. ACB in Russia twice. You know what I mean?
He had very concrete understanding with promoters.
Right. Now he's got 45 professional fights, which this is pretty cool.
That's remarkable.
Out of 96 welterweights signed to the UFC roster, Jesse Taylor has more fights than any UFC welterweight. Josh Berkman, 44. Ellenberger, 44. Lombard and Masvidal, 44. But Jesse Taylor, 45. So then I got thinking, geez, he's got more fights than any welterweight on the roster. Well, how many fighters are in the UFC completely? 550 contracts. UFC contracts.
550 is the number. 500
between all 11 weight classes, and that's including the women's division as well. 550 contracted fighters. Jesse Taylor is tied with Ben Rothwell at 46. This will be his 46th fight. The 7th most active fighter, not in the UFC, but in general, in MMA. And that's when you see him go in there and everything he does just seems like he's been here before. He's dealt with it before. So he says after the fight, the key moment, he says, did I finish him? He does not even remember choking James Krause out because he goes in there and he goes on autopilot. And because he has so much experience, he can do that. And you know me, I'm a big fan of Jesse Taylor, but I was happy to see him get the win. Although he also mentioned, I finally completed it. I finally did. No, you have one more fight to go here. So you need to go and you need to take Dhiego Lima down now as well.
But what a 7-0 inside of that Ultimate Fighter gym.
7-0 inside of the gym. And that goes to say he's got 45 pro fights, and that's not even including the 7 exhibition matches.
This guy should be the commissioner for the Contender Series. I mean, he should be the godfather of that gym.
Yeah, just crazy. And he's a guy as well that I think a lot of people were making a big deal of the fact that why was James Krause allowed to have 2 of his coaches and training partners outside of the gym come in, and Tim Elliott and Zach Cummings? Why were they allowed to come into the house and help him prepare? Nobody else had that. But in Jesse Taylor's case, you have to factor in, he's probably been to a lot of fights where he did not have any coaches. He flies to odd places in the world. He goes to Bahrain, he goes to Argentina, he goes to Mexico, and he does the dance. And when the season is called Tough Redemption, it's literally made for him, because that's what this really is. Everybody loves a good redemption story, and JT Taylor, if he wins the tough title here, you know, that's a real redemption story.
Also great that we got the visual of Jesse Taylor and John McCarthy in the cage at the same time to confirm they are, in fact, different people.
Yeah, I know, but you can't dispel the myth that perhaps there is some type of relation there. There's a father-son combination. I'm not sure how it goes, but they have a striking resemblance. By the way,
especially when Jesse has the hair growing out.
I felt that the UFC slightly dropped the ball on that. I've been watching this season, and it's been okay, but it hasn't been riveting. This was a good episode. This was an episode in the sense that not everybody likes the flair and the dramatics, but it was intriguing. You got to see Julian Lane and Seth Baczynski, and Justin Edwards was, I've never seen him upset like that in my life. He seems like a level-headed guy.
Tim Elliott came in with the straw, man, and he was just stirring everyone up.
Yeah, he just knew how to get under people's skin, and it was a good episode. And then coming off of that, they should have put Julian Lane on the finale. They should have put in Seth Baczynski on the finale. I think people would have rather seen Julian Lane or somebody versus James Krause, right? Not necessarily Tom Glicchio. Tom Glicchio did fine on the show, absolutely, but he had no personality here. You had an opportunity. I didn't want to see Baczynski versus Krause. That's the fight to make in terms of what happened on the show.
Well, this episode,
Seth is twice the size of
this
James
episode
Krause.
Totally made fights that you wanted to see at the end on this finale card. And this, to me, like, no disrespect to some of the names on this card. Like, there are some very big names for a free TV card on this, but when you've got Marcel Fortuna and Jordan Johnson on the main card, and you know, I look at this as just an opportunity, like the tough finale. You've put in 12 weeks of programming here, have the payoff at the end of it, especially for this year, where the names are going to be more recognizable to the average person, even if they didn't watch Tough.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's still Tough Redemption. It's still Tough 25 finale, Tough Redemption finale, right? These guys, they're still in it for the redemption. Guys like Seth Baczynski, who had the one fight, he's the top-seeded guy. He loses his one fight, and he's staying ready, and he wants to fight, and he wants to get in there. Yeah, maybe he's not UFC quality anymore, but give him that one more fight. Give him that. People are invested. And these guys go out, they talk the game, they sold himself a bit. Where's Ramsey Najem? Why can't he get a fight on the finale? Why can't Baczynski get one? Julian Lane, same thing here, right? With that whole Tim Elliott, let me bang, bro, exchange with him, it just makes you realize everybody knows who Julian Lane is, right? Capitalize on that. Give him one more. And if he loses, hey, we gave him the one shot at redemption and he came up short. But all the same, they should have been able to maybe market some of those guys a little bit better and give them an opportunity.
I'm not a big proponent of the 3 cards in a row. I think that's just a certain burnout that your average fan is going to have. But this year, when you consider like a lot of the names that they've loaded up on this Friday card going into Saturday, this is a year that with all these fighters coming off Tough, you could have done the 3 cards in a row where a lot of these fights could have been your Fight Pass card Friday night loaded up with the Tough fighters, and then Saturday you have your pay-per-view. Like this is when you look at this card on Friday, there's a lot of like good fights on this card. When Tisha Torres is in your opener, Gray Maynard's on Fight Pass. I mean, it shows the depth that they do have on this Friday card that's definitely falling under the radar.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. You're running 3 cards in 3 days. You have 550 contracted fighters. I mean, everything just gets lost in the loop so quickly. So if you're a casual fan, there's no way you can keep up with it. You just can't. But let's say you're a hardcore fan. Well, then how hardcore are you? Well, I'm so hardcore, I'm watching all 3 shows. Well, if you're that hardcore, you're watching the Bellator on the Friday as well. So it's so much to factor in. But now what you get with Tough is, I know these guys. I'm familiar with these guys. I just saw these guys for the last 12 weeks. I've had that investment in it. I feel like it's a given that you would insert some of these guys on here, but we've seen in prior seasons, maybe it's that they're worried about word getting out on how people do. If the more fighters you have preparing for a finale, maybe the results get out. I don't know. But they always put 10 fights on the card, and you're just going to get 2 out of it. It's the semifinals and the finals. That's it. That's all. Sometimes these guys will come back as injury replacements down the road. I would expect a guy like Ramsey to come back at some point down the road, but it's not a given. And considering that how he performed, and here's another thing, and we had discussed this going into the season. What does James Krause gain from this? What does he benefit from this? Everyone's not themselves when they're in that house. He's going into a fight against Jesse Taylor, who we talked about how experienced and big Taylor is, but he's going in essentially with a bummed eye in a bad training camp. And the night before his fight, his buddies are getting in fights with drunken guys in the house, mate. He's getting bullied by Seth Paczynski and he can't do anything about it. He's not sleeping well. And then he's expected to just go out there and fight Jesse Taylor. That's not an ideal situation for anybody, right? So how could a high performance athlete, and in his case, he's the only guy in the house that actually has a UFC contract. Why would you subject yourself to all that nonsense? That's for someone who's desperate. And the guys that are in that house right now, Justin Edwards, Seth Paczynski, Julian Lane, even Jesse Taylor, they're all desperate. They need this. James Krause didn't need this. And to that extent, he's now going to fight in the finale in what is the runner-up prize in the season of Tough, with a contract that's already paying him far more. The whole thing just makes almost no sense. But all the same, I enjoyed having him on the show because he's a supreme talent and someone that's very fun to watch, and I think he added some excitement for sure.
But at least we got to see it on the final episode where the doctor is assessing his corneal damage, explaining what the problem is the skin on top of your eye isn't forming properly. And we just cut ahead. So you're cleared. You're good. There's nothing more I can do. I was like, really?
Yeah. Shocking that. I was thinking the same thing. You know what? There's no way they're going to let this guy go. And even if you're James Krause, just, you know what? Live to fight another day, man. Just don't put yourself in that position. But he's a fighter himself. I think he's got 31 pro fights. Grizzly veterans, they do the do. And he got in there and the second round, he had an opportunity to capitalize. JT Taylor threw a sloppy outside single leg, and that was his moment, and he just toppled over. But that was the moment you realized he was completely gassed after one round. And kudos to him for sticking it out for 3, because if Jesse Taylor's improved one thing over his time as a mixed martial artist, is his ground and pound, is an activity on the ground. He used to just take you down and then basically hold you down, positionally it's very sound, and then try to get your back and try to get that rear naked choke. But what we see him now is that he completely unloads with elbows,
landed big shots on Krause.
Punches. He works you. And even going for that guillotine, which he doesn't even remember, it was so instinctual. It was so Krause leaned into him. He felt the bite, grabbed it, went right into the guard with it, ends up on mount with a nasty with a nasty guillotine choke. And good job to John McCarthy, because, he went limp quick, and McCarthy was able to recognize that. But just an all-around outstanding performance. And when people used to say, Jesse Taylor's boring, you look at how he's finished his last number of guys in the Tough House, and how this guy is that experienced, and how he can put it all together. And, it's exciting to see him come back. I hope he gets the win over Dhiego Lima, but I guess that remains to be seen.
We'll spend a lot of our time on 213, but just looking at this card on Friday night, of course, you do have Jesse Taylor and Dhiego Lima in the finals, James Krause against Tom Galicchio. And then on this undercard, Jessica Ai, Aspen Ladd, Ed Herman against CB Dollaway.
Love that fight.
Who's back from his elevator incident at UFC 203.
Long time.
And Angela Hill, Ashley Yoder. And then main card, some of the highlights, Elias Theodorou against Brad Tavares. I think this is a really good fight for Elias Theodorou at this point. Brad Tavares is someone that we've certainly, we saw the streak he had, but coming off a series of losses, and then beat Kyle Magalesh last September at 203. And Mark Diakese, Drakkar Klose.
That's a fun fight.
That's a really good fight.
Very fun.
But this main event, I'm really glad this is in the main event position with Michael Johnson, Justin Gaethje. I think this is an awesome fight. I think this is one of the best fights this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what? That's what you're saying. There's so many fights happening this weekend, and what's going to get lost in the shuffle? This is the type of fight that does not get lost in the shuffle. People are very excited for the debut of Justin Gaethje, and what can this guy do, and bringing that undefeated record. And he fights with such a reckless and crazy style. It's like, who could you possibly match him up with? And this Michael Johnson matchup is the perfect bit of matchmaking. It just makes entirely too much sense. Now, both guys got something to prove here in the sense that if you're Michael Johnson, you've been through some wars, and you got to get that marquee victory. He wants the title shot. He wants to be in the high-profile fights. This is the opportunity to beat this undefeated upstart, coming to the UFC, making his debut. Bright lights are on him. I got to go out there, and I know he's going to give me a fun fight, the kind of fight that people will be talking about at the end of a weekend that's loaded with fights. And meanwhile, if you're Justin Gaethje, you haven't proven yourself at this level. You got to go in there, but also a guy that's fairly young but has been through the ringers. I mean, I don't want to say both guys are damaged, but at this point, a win here is pivotal for either man. And when you envision how this fight ends, it's almost certainly one guy's moving forward in the division with a spectacular win, and one guy's going to take a big step backwards, because when you talk about Elias Theodorou, Brad Tavares, I really like that fight, I do, but it almost seems like a foregone conclusion it's going the distance. I mean, Brad Tavares is a decision fighter and Elias Theodorou is a decision fighter. There's nothing wrong with that. It'll be a fun fight. But when you think about Gaethje and you think about Michael Johnson, not only does it just scream finish, you're giving me 5 rounds of this, of carnage. I mean, it's I don't want to say a foregone conclusion because Chuck versus Wandy went the distance, but this has got finished just spelled all over it, John.
Yeah, we'll see if this is the Antonio Silva Mark Hunt.
That's
the
what
most unlikely 5-round fight ever for 2 heavyweights.
Oh, craziness.
This fight, to me, you can look at it a number of ways. For Gaethje, I definitely look at what Nate Diaz was able to make work, and it was just volume on Michael Johnson. Conversely, I mean, Khabib Nurmagomedov put together a blueprint to just nullify Michael Johnson. I don't see that as Gaethje's game plan here to try and incorporate any kind of wrestling or grappling into this. And you stand with Michael Johnson. I think Gaethje's putting himself in the line of fire here. It's, to me, I mean, Justin Gaethje, he has some highlight reels that are incredible to watch, but this dude gets hit, and Michael Johnson is not a guy I would want to be taking shots in order to land a shot.
Yeah, also, when you look at the level of competition, it's like, I love Brian Cobb, don't get me wrong, the Bandit, I love him, good guy, Luis Firmino, fun fighter, Richard Petishnock, but these guys are not on the same level as the Dustin Poiriers of the world and the Edson Barbosas of the world, and that's what really shows the versatile of Mikey Johnson. I mean, a guy that doesn't have a spectacular record on paper, but you look at the improvements he's made, specifically under Henry Hoof, his footwork is on another level, his striking's fantastic. If you're going to let him be the aggressor like Edson Barbosa did, he'll walk you down the entire ring and he'll batter you up. If you want to come at him like the way Dustin Poirier did, he's just got to touch that power. That's the thing. If you give this guy openings, he can make you pay severely. Now, Nate Diaz, we know all the abilities that Nate Diaz has. He has a cast iron chin. He has an ability to play the range game. He has an ability to get into opponent's head. He has an ability to push a pace and take you into deep waters. That seemed to be a kryptonite for him. Khabib Nurmagomedov, I mean, that's a style that very few people will be able to put on. But all the same, we see the holes in his game. But marching forward and attacking him while leaving your hands down and your chin up just seems like not the kind of way that you want to fight a guy like Michael Johnson. And that's why I just think this is and you're also matching up fantastic camps with fantastic coaches. I mean, this is high-level MMA at its purest, and that's why, deservedly so, it deserves to headline a free card, right? Because people want to watch this, and it deserves the 5 rounds. Whereas if you shuffle this on a pay-per-view, for example, if you put this on the 213 card, well, it doesn't come above either of the title fights.
No, so this is probably,
and it doesn't.
This isn't even headlining the prelims on 213. Yeah, I don't think
exactly, and therefore it doesn't get near the amount of spotlight. So I think they did a good job by letting it headline.
Yeah, and I think it also helped the fact that they were able to get footage from World Series as well. I mean, Justin Gaethje is someone that you want to have those clips to really sell this guy on.
You'd have to, because he's had so many fights with them. It's like, what do you draw back on? But prior to that.
We look ahead now to 213. Do you have an official pick there? Like, I lean Michael Johnson in this fight. I just think that he is going to have those abilities to win this fight. But if Gaethje makes this thing a war, I mean, we've seen Michael Johnson. The Nate Diaz fight I thought Johnson was going to run through Nate Diaz in that fight. And Nate Diaz just wore him down and made it his fight. And I'm not saying Justin Gaethje can't do that himself.
Yeah, I myself, when I look at tape and I look at the numbers and I look at stuff on paper, then that gives you a good indication who you think is going to win. But you always got that gut feeling, so to speak. And when I think about Justin Gaethje, and I think that, yeah, if he can push the pace, then he will break Michael Johnson down. And if he can survive, though, that early onslaught for 5 rounds, this guy's got no cardio issues. Even if it appears that he's being tired, he never takes his foot off the gas. And yeah, that's a way to beat Michael Johnson. I keep playing it in my head. Well, how's this one going to go back and forth? But it's actually a quote that Justin Gaethje, that is the reason that I will not pick Justin Gaethje. And that's as soon as he came to the UFC, he quoted, "I can't guarantee nothing other than I will get knocked out within my first 10 fights for the UFC."
Well,
and that to me spells, if you talk to the guy, you get a sense of his personality and how he wants to be in wars and how he wants to test himself. He wants to bite down on his mouthpiece. And as a result, he often fights to the level of his competition. If he's not fighting a guy that's all that good, well, then he's not fighting all that good. I mean, the closest fight he's had in the last number of fights, probably that Melvin Gillard fight, which surprisingly went the distance and was a split, although we obviously beat him. But he's got to get in your face and he's got to make it a dirty fight. And when that doesn't work for him, when he's finally pushed to his limit and he's finally tested, he's even acknowledging, this is not going to work forever. Someone's going to clip me, but it's just a matter of who. And you match him up with a lot of guys in this division, and I think he does not get clipped. But when you're playing with Michael Johnson, you're playing with this guy who specifically is amongst the highest rated guys, at least in pure punching power in the division. He's going to hit you. And when he hits you, he does make you pay. And coming from that Henry Hoof background, you know he's just going to have a good game plan that's probably going to be matador this guy, get him tired, get him hurt, and then as soon as you see that opportunity, pounce.
And let's not forget the lineal version of the World Series of Fighting lightweight title on the line.
On the line.
In the main event.
Absolutely.
Moving over to 213 on Saturday night. I mean, we've said it before. I think all attention is on 214. This is a card, though, it's a very strong pay-per-view lineup. I just don't see this doing a gigantic number. Prelims will feature Jordan Meehan fighting Bilal Muhammad. That, to me,
super fun,
very underrated fight on this card. Travis Brown and Alexei Oleinik. That one's kind of fun and interesting for Travis Brown, who is, I mean, this guy's stock has fallen significantly. He's had some very big losses to Cain Velasquez, to Derek Lewis this year. Alexei Oleinik, hardly a walkover either.
You know what I was talking about? The most experienced guys in the UFC. It's him.
This guy's
62 professional fights, and he's just fought.
That's on his record.
Absolutely,
that we're
that's
aware
on his
of.
record.
Like if this guy had 100 fights,
dude.
I'd totally buy it.
Absolutely, he is just so and fought at 185 pounds. He's fighting Bodog against Chael Sonnen back in the day. Fought at 205. Fights at heavyweight. It's just. He brings variables to the table that if Travis Brown's on, then Travis Brown should be able to beat this guy, absolutely. But Oleinik's a tricky fighter. And when you're dealing with tricky fighters, anything can happen. What I mean is Oleinik got 5 career KOs, which considering he's got 52 career wins, it's something like 10% of his wins are by KO. He's not a power puncher. But you see him go in against the Anthony Hamilton fight and the Jared Rochal fight. And he's got that Russian striking style where he's not looking to outpunch you standing. He's looking to throw a couple bombs, hit you, clip you, close that distance, take you down. Once he takes you down, he's got the submission game to make almost anybody pay. But that being said, he likes to lean off the cage on that double leg and suck the hips out. That's not a position you want to be in with Travis Brown. This fight's super fun because it's got variables. You got 2 middling heavyweights. Is Travis Brown completely done? Well, this is the opportunity to show it. When you're fighting the Cain Velasquez of the world and the Fabricio Verdums of the world, it's not a big deal that you're losing. The Derek Lewis fight, maybe perhaps questionable, but, that was a weird fight in itself. I mean, he could have won that fight just as easily as he lost that fight. But Alexei Oleinik's no walkover whatsoever. And the fact that is headlining the prelims just goes to show that if they don't have one single star attraction on this card, they'll just load it. And this is a loaded card. I mean, it sucks that they lost Robbie Lawler, Donald Cerrone, but in the grand scheme of things, the UFC is doing a good job of just filling the void by putting intriguing matchups and good fights, and I do very much like this offering.
Do you have any opinion one way or the other of what, I mean, they focused on Amanda Nunes Valentina Shevchenko as the headliner. Do you see Yoel Romero and Robert Whittaker having any more intrigue, or is it largely a wash, whichever one they had chosen to promote as the main event? I understand one's an interim title, but do you sense any difference?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to say. I just feel like they haven't really been promoting the co-main event very much. I mean, you hear infinite amount of stuff on Amanda Nunes versus Valentina Shevchenko. I just really haven't seen that interest level there for Whittaker versus Yoel Romero, and that's a fantastic fight. And I just feel like because there's so many fights happening in the weekend and there's so much going on, that maybe it's getting skipped over ever so slightly, and that's a shame. Because if a lot of people want to go on record and they want to tell you straight up that they don't think Michael Bisping's the top middleweight, and that's fine. Well, then who are the next 2 best middleweights? Well, we know Yoel Romero is one of them, and we just saw Jacare knock off the next best guy in Jacare. So this is the next best fight you can make. And once again, when you're talking about storylines and how this fight might play out, this is 5 rounds of this, right? Yoel Romero, can he take down Robert Whittaker? You'd have to assume so. You'd have to be able to take him down. But this is 5 rounds, and we've seen Yoel in the past. For as athletic as he is, and as fast and as powerful as he is, if you can get this guy into deep waters, and he's not allowed to just take that extra little time on a stool, then who knows what's going to happen? And I think this is a very fun fight. It's a good fight. And funny enough, I was doing a little bit of research last night. I said, you know what I'm going to watch? I'm going to watch those top 5 media moments.
Our favorite video.
My God.
Please remind our listeners about this. Is me and Cody's favorite video ever.
Yeah. So they ask him about the fight, and then before he answers,
this was right before the Machida fight.
Yeah,
I believe.
And he says he looks down and he mumbles, oh God. And then he takes an awkward pause where he's got his eyes closed, and you can tell he's starting to tear up.
And the question is, what are you fighting for?
Yeah.
Is that it?
And he's tearing up. He's sitting there. It's a little awkward pause, and then he's like, when you have family, it's got a subtitle on it. He's like, when you have family, you must be willing to die and risk it Oh, that's it. That's the quote. It's crazy.
There is such a gigantic opportunity to market this guy. Like, if you just watch the embedded shows, just his discussion, he compares his age to Robert Whittaker's. I mean, there's like a 14-year difference here, and he compares it to Ali and George Foreman. And in describing George Foreman, he's like, and you talk about another guy that was a vivacious man. It's just like his use of the term vivacious. Like, this guy's awesome. Like, he's just such a great personality that I feel could so be exploited to such a bigger degree than he is. Like, I think fight fans are aware of this guy, but he's such an entertaining personality that you can't create a Yoel Romero. There's only one guy like Yoel Romero.
He's the soldier of God, man. You always know you're going to get something out of him. I mean, whether it's controversial or not, whether it's he grabbed the fence or he didn't, or whether he stayed on the stool or he didn't, or whether he said something post-fight, the guy's fights speak for themselves, and he's a very high-quality athlete. I mean, you talk about 40, but how many guys move like that? How many guys are that athletic?
Guys look like that?
It's unbelievable. And you know what? Here's the one thing that I'm actually going to give Yoel Romero, because I've been following this guy for a long time now, and people always say maybe the smell test doesn't pass for him. You look at this guy when he was like 18 years old, and he looks exactly the same. You look at him when he was wrestling the Chael Sandersons of the world, when he was qualified. He got a silver medal at the 2000 Olympics. That's 17 years ago. He looks almost identical. And to think that he's 40 years old and he's still competing at that level, your body breaks down if you're using. This guy just almost seems like he's the perfect athlete. And I know that sounds crazy, it really does, but I think he does resonate with fans because he's funny and he's entertaining and he's got this crazy flashy style. And if he goes out there and he claims the title, there's nobody in their right mind that's thinking to themselves, well, Michael Bisping's the real champ. Let's see how he would do with Bisping. It's like he would probably be a 3.5 to 1 at the very least favorite over Michael Bisping if they were to fight to unify the titles. But that being said, he's got a big fight ahead of him. Robert Whittaker could just as easily do the same thing he did against Jacare. Get taken down, survive, get up, make him pay.
Robert Whittaker takes a lot of principles about other welterweights and just throws them out the window because this guy causes so much confusion with his opponents. And I'm very curious to see how Romero deals with that striking. We've also seen the fact that Yoel Romero, for all the accolades, this guy can get taken down. I mean,
Brunson got him down.
Brunson did it. I mean, this guy can get taken down.
Jacare got him down clean too.
And if we're getting out of the third round, this becomes really interesting to me. I do not look at this as some victory for Yoel Romero that you can just look at on paper and think that's a given. I think Robert Whittaker has a very likely chance to win this.
I think his chance, though, has got to come with that just hitting him, clipping him with some punch. And then once he's hurt, then you can really start to get your game going. Once he's tired a little bit, then you can really get your game going. But when you think about the wrestling side of it, I mean, Jacare, just because of his jiu-jitsu accolades, he's got those go-to takedowns. He gets him tired. He gets him a little bit hurt. He's able to take him down. And then once he's got him down, I mean, it's Jacare. Brunson's a former All-American collegiate wrestler and a super explosive athletic guy. He was able to get him down, and Yoel does get back up. But it's like we're talking about with the Jesse Taylor situation. I really look at sizes, and Yoel Romero did not look at a place competing at 205 pounds when he used to compete with Strikeforce at 205. When he came down to 185, the guy's a specimen. He's just so big at 185. You look at Robert Whittaker, who's a former 170, didn't really like the weight cut. You know what? I'm going to move up. He's at 185 pounds. He's a guy that trains out of Australia. Australia, not necessarily known for the wrestling game to begin with. It almost seems like this is a styles clash. You got the wrestler who should be able to take Whittaker down. He's the bigger guy. He can hurt him. He can damage him, keep him on the ground. Conversely, you got Whittaker, who's going to have the striking advantage. And if he can tire him over the course of 5, then he can hurt him. But people are so just often quick to forget things. And when Robert Whittaker's case, everyone thinks about that Jacare fight, and wow, he looked fantastic there. Literally one fight prior to that, Derek Brunson is moments away from taking him out. Using that speed, using that quickness, he hurts Whittaker early. It's unfortunately, Whittaker survives, and he makes him pay. Will that same thing happen here? We don't know. But I love bits of matchmaking when there's just different ways to look at this. I don't like these big, clear favorites. I'd like to be able to say, you know what? Either guy's got a good shot here. It's just whoever puts their game plan, their best foot forward, whoever employs their game plan to the fullest of their abilities, and whatever game plan proves to be the right one. But either guy have good merit, and those are good fights. It's the same thing with the main event, Nunes Shevchenko. Nunes is going to try to blow her out of the water early, and she likely can't go 5 hard rounds. Shevchenko, we've seen her go 5 hard rounds. The last time that fight happened, the tide started to turn in the third. Well, now we've got 2 extra. Those storylines, those question marks, that's what makes this such an exciting sport.
Yeah, I really like this main event a lot. I know so often it's going back to the same narrative that, if that first fight at 196 had gone 2 rounds longer. But I think what's often forgotten about that fight is that that 10-8 second round for Nunes.
What a beating that round was.
Why don't we talk about what actually did happen and not what theoretically could have happened in that fight? And I feel that Nunes, she gets this rap on her cardio, but it's like we haven't seen her falter to that degree yet. And I just see this fight as such a toss-up fight. Shevchenko, very patient, and I think Nunes, you're going to see her ultra-aggressive, which to me, that plays into Shevchenko just counter-punching her and forcing Nunes to make mistakes, which that was the game plan against Holly, who's a very patient fighter.
Yep.
I don't think you're going to see any of that patience from Nunes. And Dean Thomas is saying as much on all these embedded videos that he wants her to just go forward, and any opening, don't second-guess it, just throw.
Yeah, but see, that's the issue right then and there. Right? Because it's not like you're looking at Shevchenko, who's just a walkthrough. I mean, just submitting Juliana Pena shows that the grappling's improving. The fact that she's a judo black belt shows that she's got the grappling, but she's so much more than that. She comes from a Muay Thai base. She's 56-2 as a pro Muay Thai fighter. She's got Master of Sport degree. She's got Master of Sport Taekwondo in Western boxing, in judo, in Muay Thai, in all these various hand-to-hand combat arts. She's as accomplished as you could get. So putting her away is going to be an issue. And if your game plan is put the pedal to the metal and finish her, that's not a great game plan. But you got to look at it this way. Amanda Nunes has got 6 UFC victories. 5 of those UFC victories, she's finished her opponent in the very first round. The only time she has not finished her win in the first round was Valentina Shevchenko. Mm-hmm. You look at her losses, both of her losses, are fights that she was taking a little bit deeper. She starts fantastic against Kat Zingano. But what happens? That pushing of the pace, that aggressiveness, that killer be killed mindset does not allow you to fight for a prolonged period of time. So eventually you tire. Once you tire, someone's going to take advantage. The last time she fought Shevchenko, she fought just like she fights her other fights. Go in there, finish this girl as quick as possible. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. So the second round, okay, I still got some gas, finish her as quick as possible. Almost does. The third round, there's not much left in the tank. And listen, the third round's really not that one-sided. It wasn't like it was a 10-8 the other way. No. Shevchenko gets the takedown, and once she gets the takedown, that's when you notice Nunes has got nothing left in the tank. Because as Robin Black would say, she used all of her energy on the swim back and left none for the swim home, right? She basically redlined the whole way there. And so when you think about 5 rounds, she's never even been 5 rounds. Mm-hmm. She's never even been past 3 rounds. And the one time that we saw her go to that third round with Shevchenko, she didn't look good. The other time, against Kat Zingano, she didn't look good. So just if history has a way of repeating itself, then you have to make corrections. Corrections to me would indicate go to the gym and we're going to learn how to pace ourselves. I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to wait for the opportunity, explode on the opportunity, and then we're going to lay back, try to dictate the action a little bit. But when you hear Thomas come out and say, we're just going to go, you hope he's just saying that to maybe throw Shevchenko's team off or maybe just throw somebody off, because I don't think that's the proper game plan. It could work. It could absolutely work. I was on record last week saying, or I was on the record for that Michael Chiesa Kevin Lee fight, saying that Chiesa just needed to take this. He had 5 rounds to work with. He'd be able to take Lee into the deeper waters. But what happens is Lee smokes him out in the first round. Early stoppage or not, Lee dominates that first round. He beats him because he's the front runner guy. He's the quick guy. He's the quicker fighter. Nunes will have that. Nunes will likely win the first couple rounds here, but it's how 3, 4, and 5 are going to play out. And if you're just looking at how either girl performs, Shevchenko does not have cardio issues whatsoever, and Nunes has proven cardio issues. So it's a fun fight. And as you mentioned, I mean, would I rather see Yoel Romero over Whittaker as a headliner? No, actually not. I think this is the right fight, and I'm going to really look forward to it.
Yeah, I think that you look at this entire main card, there's a lot of fights you can go either way. I mean, we have the third fight involving Fabricio Verdum and Alistair Overeem.
Great times.
Anthony Pettis back at lightweight, which I think is the right career move for him against Jim
against
Miller.
a style that he traditionally doesn't do good against. So they're good fights.
Yeah, so this is a big weekend of fights going on. I mean, if there's a fight at the top of your list, Cody, what is it?
Through the whole weekend.
The whole weekend, everything.
Have to be Gaethje versus Michael Johnson. I mean, I think if you were just to put a poll up on Twitter and you were like, which 2 lightweights do you want to see fight? I mean, this almost seems like it. I mean, it's just, when you talk about style fights, and I'm talking about all these different style fights, and Olenek's going to try to get it down, and Brown's going to try to stand it up, and, Shevchenko's going to try to maybe get it down and keep it into deeper waters. Like, everyone's got that game plan. There's really no game plan. They're going to charge at each other, and they're going to throw hands, and I'm a purist. I like Jesse Taylor. I like seeing good ground and pound. I like seeing the grind style. If you can't find him, grind him. If he's too fast for you, get a hold of him and take him down. But this is just completely polar opposite, and this is what the casual fans like. And I think when the UFC is trying to build stars and they're trying to build name brand guys and they're trying to, deliver the best fights and the funnest fights for fans, I mean, this really does absolutely jump up. And there's a couple other guys, I mean, working at Fight Network, I mean, I watch a lot of guys like that Trevin Giles. I think he's opening up the Friday card, I believe.
Terrion Ware's on the card.
Terrion Ware, I mean, there's a lot of guys. This is the one thing that's beautiful about the UFC, right? If you watch regional show MMA, you see these guys and they get all the way up to their respective level. They might be the RFA champ, they might be the LFA champ, they might be a smaller organization champ, but they're the best guy in Oklahoma, the best guy in Texas. What do you do beyond that? The UFC is basically pairing off the best guy in Texas versus the best guy out of Wisconsin. That guy that Trevin Giles is fighting, first of all, is a 205er, 6'4", and he's out of Ben Rothwell's gym. And he's actually one of Ben Rothwell's coaches, not one of his head coaches, because Ben Rothwell actually discovered this kid, but he's always cornered Ben Rothwell. He's a purple belt under him in BJJ, under that same BJJ coach. He lists his favorite choke as the go-go choke. And Trevin Giles is a guy he's supremely athletic, but he's never even fought at 205 pounds before. So he's moving up, taking on the bigger guy. Everything has got something fun about it. It's just there's so much happening this weekend that you can't forget about Derek Campos and Brandon Gertz. You can't forget about Rafael Lovato Jr. There's just so much action happening, John, that I can understand a lot of people not being able to consume all of it, but whatever you do decide to consume, it should be fun.
All right. Well, what's also interesting? Do you expect any Mayweather-McGregor promotion on this card on Saturday night?
For sure.
To me, if I was a UFC and seeing this pay-per-view is somewhat, it's just not, I think, at the top of everyone's priority list for the month of July, I would promote the fact Conor McGregor's first UFC interview on this pay-per-view if you tune in. I seriously think people would tune in just to know that Joe Rogan's interviewing Conor McGregor by satellite.
Yeah, you know what? People are dying to hear what he's got to say, and maybe he's trying to stay out of the spotlight a little bit and really focus on training.
Is.
Yeah, but yeah, get a video interview. At least let him say something. Maybe, I don't know if you could organize something with Mayweather, but this is the hot talk, and this is what everybody's talking about. And even people that are the super casuals that are tuning it in, they're still bringing it up. Oh, they see a UFC fighter. Oh, Conor McGregor? That's just what they know. That's what they gravitate to. So capitalize on the moment. You're going to have eyes on you all weekend long. Maybe try to promote it. I got a question for you, actually, because I was thinking about it the other day. Would you think it adds 0 pay-per-view buys whatsoever, or maybe even adds a few? What if the card was Anderson Silva versus Roy Jones down on the card, and then Nick Diaz, which he just popped again for USADA, which is so stupid, that whereabouts thing? We could talk about that. I got a real bone to pick. That makes no sense to me. But
go ahead and talk about the Nick Diaz thing. What do you
here's what I don't understand. Okay, so he has not had a fight for over 2 years, correct?
Yes.
But he hasn't officially retired. Therefore, he has a contract with the UFC. That would imply he can't go fight for another organization. He has a contract with the UFC.
Yes.
So because he has not retired officially and he has a valid contract with the UFC, he's automatically thrown into this testing pool. Now, he has not indicated to anybody that he wishes to fight anytime soon. Yet he's in this testing pool, which means that he has to let them know every single day of the week where he's going to be for I think it's 3 months in advance, 30 days in advance, whatever the case is. You got to let them know a month, between 30 and 90 days in advance, where you're going to be every single day, so that they can come test you because you're getting ready for a fight. Now, he's not getting ready for a fight. He has not indicated he's getting ready for a fight. But because he has a valid contract with the UFC, he's automatically subjected to this. Now, you got to realize this man's an independent contractor. So you signed a contract years ago, before this is even a thing, and because you still have the contract, you're now subject to these random drug testing. And trust me, Nick Diaz does not seem like the kind of guy that's going on an app every day and letting them know his whereabouts. So guess what? He got flagged 1, 2, 3 times, and now he's getting a suspension out of it. He's not your regular fighter right now. You need to do the same thing you did with Brock Lesnar. Just allow him to sit on the sidelines. And if he says, I want to come back, stick him in the drug testing pool. Don't give him a bye like you gave Lesnar. Stick him in the 3 months. I don't care. But the fact that he's on it year round and he hasn't even had a fight in the last couple of years makes absolutely no sense to me.
See, I don't understand if there was an actual opt-in that these fighters had to make, or if they were just automatically thrown into the pool. Like, I get that fact with Nick Diaz. I also look at it that if you don't want to be subjected to this testing, you don't want to be privy to these suspensions, retire. Just announce your retirement. If you want to come back, you can.
That's fair. I consider that. I think, well, why doesn't Nick Diaz just retire? But imagine the UFC here. They've got this George St. Pierre versus Michael Bisping fight, and for whatever reason, George pulls off. And they can pick up the phone and they can call Nick Diaz, and they can say, Nick, can you take this fight? So if he was to say, yeah, okay, I'll take this fight, well, you haven't been in the pool for a certain amount of time, it's almost as if he's sitting on the reserves with nothing happening. But Dana goes on record and says, I don't think this guy's going to fight again. When you talk to Nick, him and Nate always say the same stupid thing. Give me $10 million. No one's going to give you $10 million. So you're either going to fight or not. It doesn't seem like they are. So yeah, maybe the retirement thing is an option, but
It's like if he wants to have this option that I can take a fight with George St. Pierre on a month's notice, well, then you have to do this. And it's not as though these whereabout failures are this giant problem for all these other fighters. And, I just look with Nick Diaz that here's a guy that, to me, this guy creates so many of his own problems that I have a hard time having sympathy on this one, because this is one that's easily avoidable if you have an issue with it. And maybe he doesn't. Maybe this guy doesn't even care about these whereabouts failures. And it's like,
well, clearly he doesn't.
Throw out whatever you want at me. But I just feel like you've got to make a choice. If you don't want to be subjected to this, you don't want to have to piss into a cup at 6 a.m. in the morning, just announce your retirement.
Yeah, and maybe that's the tough thing, right? That's
what Brock Lesnar's done.
Well, that's what he'd have to do, because realistically speaking, is he going to have to fill out these whereabouts things for the rest of his life? Is he going to have to do it for the next 5 years? Is he going to have to tell them where he's going to be every single day of his life for the next couple of years?
As long as he wants to identify himself as a full-time UFC fighter, yes.
Seems so stupid.
Listen, I don't agree with how this whole thing has been mandated on these fighters. They got no say in the matter.
Exactly.
But at the same time, we know this is a problem. What are these fighters doing about it? Like, it's not our job to create this change for these fighters. The media side talks about this all the time, about this unfairness. But these fighters, they realize the sponsor problems, the whereabouts that they have to be privy to. It's like, don't complain about this law after you've broken the law. Attack the problem now and try and enact some change. And these fighters aren't going to do that.
Couldn't there be some type of process on the USADA side, or some type of process from them that they indicate, okay, you know what, this fighter hasn't fought for X amount of months. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop checking his location. We're going to start checking him, right? He's officially off. Now, if he decides that he wants to return, if the UFC decides they book him, we let the UFC know straight off the bat, just like Angela Hill. You cannot book this fighter unless they complete their X amount of months, I think it's 3 months, 90 days of the testing. They re-enter the pool, they rejoin. Because the issue is when, just like what I'm saying, they have 550 fighters on the roster, right? Well, how are you going to check all these guys first and foremost? And when you look at the guys that are still under contract with them, you're going to run into the Yoshihiro Akayamas of the world. Is this guy supposed to tell you where he's going to be every single day from Japan on the offhand chance that somebody might fly all the way to the other side of the world to test Yoshihiro Akiyama? It makes no sense, John. So why not pull him out? He hasn't fought in the year. We're going to pull him out. Vince Pichel, he hasn't fought a fight. He fought recently. He hadn't had a fight prior to Damian Brown in the 2 or 3 years. We're going to pull this guy off. Now, if Vince Pichel contacts you and he says, hey, you know what? Sean Shelby, I'm good to go. I'm healthy. I'm ready to go. Okay, we have a valid contract with him. We want to book him. Enter him back in. Nick Diaz, he's been on the sideline for a couple of years. He hasn't really said he's going to fight, but he hasn't really said he's going to retire. Let's stop checking him. Whatever. And a lot of these guys, like a Miracle Crow Cop, he's probably doing steroids right now, rehabbing whatever injury he had. And he was the nice guy that told USADA about it. I'm using something for rehabilitation purposes, and they red flagged the guy, right? If he wasn't fighting and he was just hanging out and he's trying to rehab a shoulder injury, then what does it matter what he's putting in his body, right? It's for rehab purposes. Cyborg, she got flagged because she was at the hospital. The hospital is giving her stuff that her body needs. The stuff that her body needs happens to be a red flag according to USADA. There's a gray area. And unfortunately, the gray area is getting a lot of fighters caught. And it's crazy to try to regulate 550 guys and girls, but to just keep on the entire thing and to false test. This was a tainted supplement. No, that guy has an excuse. No, we'll take this excuse, but we won't take that excuse. Oh, this guy was in a state where he has a card for marijuana. Yeah, but it was in competition. There's so much going on that you can tell eventually someone's going to make a mistake, and people have made mistakes, and the punishment is a 2-year ban for a guy like Frank Mir. The punishment is some crazy ban for a guy like Tom Lawler. Is it unfair? Probably. But once you get banned, you got to even look at Casey, right? Courtney Casey.
Courtney Casey was an awful case in Texas. Her name just got dragged
through the mud hard.
But in fairness, that wasn't a USADA issue. That was a Texas issue.
Of course.
And USADA really backed her in that whole thing.
True.
I just look at how can you actively say, we're not going to test you for a year? That's the whole point.
Well, you can't fight for that year. I mean, you can't fight until you say.
But the whole point of a retired fighter coming back into a pool is not so you can go off for 2 years, do God knows what to your body, and then just come back a different fighter. The whole point of that pool is that you can't just come back and suddenly you're not subjected to all of this testing. I mean, to just tell a guy, we're not going to test you for a year, I just don't know how USADA responsibly can do that, especially to other fighters. Why? because Nick Diaz has said he doesn't want to take a fight, he's not subject to the same testing that I'm subjected to, and they're not going to test everybody 4 times a year. But it's the idea that, man, if you are going to gamble and take something, the knock on your door could come at any point. And if you feel the fighters have no rights here, I'm not disagreeing with that. They got no say in this matter at all. It's a gigantic invasion of privacy. This would never fly in most sports leagues where you are subjected to 24/7 testing and 24/7 whereabouts. It's insanity for a unionized organization of athletes.
It's insanity. Now you factor in that they're not getting paid particularly well and they're independent contractors. I mean, the whole thing just doesn't make sense. And this is just another addition onto the fact that you're not allowed to have your own sponsors anymore, even though you're an independent contractor. And now you're going to have to give these whereabouts notifications, and you're subjected to giving a blood test or giving a urine test. And it often comes like you've seen with like Ian McCall, for example. Maybe he didn't fill it out that day. So they show up at his gym. Well, where are you? I'm at home taking a nap. What? Your whereabouts thing. You didn't tell us that you were going home for a nap. Well, I switched my practice up. I practiced this morning. I went home for a nap. Well, you've got 30 minutes to get down here. Or I'm a full grown man. You know, I didn't need to tell you I was going home to take a nap, but I better, just in case somebody shows up. I mean, it's just ludicrous to me. It's absolutely ludicrous to me. And the fact that
do you think it's that rigorous though? Because I feel if that
in the States, if you're an American, yeah, why not? If you're a foreign fighter, I could see you being able, they're not going to come over. Look at Jose Aldo. The guy got stopped at the border and lost the urine sample because he didn't have a visa to go work in Brazil. That's ludicrous. I mean, that's crazy. If you're a Russian fighter, are they going to go to the mountains of Chechnya and find you? Not likely, right? There's got to be, and guys are moving camps all the time, and, I'm supposed to be here. I'm going to go train in Thailand for a month. Oh, I had something happen. Like, there's just so many variables. These guys are trying to live their life. My final point to that, and this is no disrespect to any fighter out there whatsoever. It's no disrespect to any pro athlete. But John, you know fighters. You're probably friends with fighters. You've met a lot of fighters. You've interviewed a lot of fighters. I'm in the same boat. A lot of these guys, their focus is the fight. Their task at hand is the training. They have managers for a reason. They have people looking out for them and cooking for them and doing their laundry for them for a reason. You know what I mean?
Well, you could make a bigger case.
How is this guy supposed to tell his whereabouts every single day?
Is there a certain responsibility on these managers that...
Yeah, but imagine you manage 50 guys.
Well, it becomes very difficult. But at the same time, the UFC, this is a clear case over these last 2 years of the power that they have over these athletes, that this was able to get just rubber stamped and put into place. So it's 2 years this week since USADA came into place and the Reebok uniforms were put into place.
Well, now you get back into union talks, right? I mean, that's what it all centers around. Should there be a union to protect the fighters from stuff like this?
Absolutely, there should be. The problem is getting these 550 UFC fighters onto the same page. It's insanity. Yeah. They tried to put a fraction of them into Las Vegas for a retreat, and we had police filings for Cyborg blasting Angela Magana in the face. We had
Mike Perry and Stevens almost went at it.
Anyway, was there something else you want to mention before we got into this Diaz territory? I thought there was a point you wanted to conclude on, or is that all?
No. The point is that we're clearly giving the boxers the advantage here to the sum that we got the greatest boxer of all time taking on Conor McGregor. Okay,
you were asking about Anderson Silva and Roy Jones Jr.
Anderson versus Jones has got the intrigue, and though I think Jones kills him, but we also have a very old, decrepit version of Roy Jones taking on a very old and decrepit version of Anderson Silva. Maybe that one doesn't have the intrigue. But even like Fernando Vargas and Diaz used to go back and forth back in the day. You know, Diaz used to talk to guys, and when I think about guys in the UFC that might be able to have a decent boxing style, could Nick Diaz win a world title? Zero chance. No chance. Not going to happen. Never going to happen. Could Nick Diaz go out there and beat a couple guys? Yeah, absolutely. Could Nick Diaz go out and beat a fading veteran, a guy that was at the top of the mountain a couple years ago that ain't there anymore? Yeah. I mean, I don't see why not. And I just feel like if you're really getting the boxing fans and the MMA fans, right, the rest of the card is going to be boxing matches. It'll be the Paulie Malignaggi's. It'll be the Adrian Broners. It'll be the Ashley Theophanes. I think Jay Leon Love is going to rematch Gabe Rosado. That's one of the fights that they're putting on. This Olympic boxer that Floyd signed from Britain is going to be on the undercard. So now you're only catering, the undercard only caters to the boxing fans. The main event caters to both to a certain extent, but the rest of the card is just boxing, right? Why not have that interesting fight? Now, maybe it adds nothing. Maybe you're going to sell 4 million pay-per-views, 5 million pay-per-views, whatever the number they're trying to sell. And listen, Roy Jones and Anderson, that's not going to add anything. Nick Diaz boxing someone, which you can't right now, it's not going to add anything. But don't you think they should do something like that?
Listen, if the UFC had more of a stake in the actual promotion of that night's card, 100%. the difference is it's a Mayweather card, and therefore, what do we get out of paying Nick Diaz, who's going to want $1 million for this fight, probably? Yeah. What value does Nick Diaz have beyond this one night for us? And I think this is just, hey, we've got the largest boxing audience possible because it's going to be a lot of non-fans watching. It's going to be a boxing card because that's how it's a Mayweather promoted card. So I don't think they have any care in the world about the UFC. I
just feel like if there was more opportunities to make, like, could a UFC fighter beat a boxer? Could an MMA fighter beat a boxer? I think so, but it has to be the right matchup. And to that extent, and yeah, he's a boxer. But I don't know if you caught Manny Pacquiao versus Jeff Horn on the weekend. Jeff Horn is a very inexperienced Australian boxer. Inexperienced by the fact he's got like 14 pro fights. And he's taking on Manny Pacquiao, who's one of the greatest boxers in the history of boxing. A guy that fought Floyd Mayweather in a fight that a lot of people even had him beating Floyd Mayweather. Not the fight itself, but going into the fight. He's Manny Pacquiao. He's a legend. And I watched the fight, John. And I didn't even go on Twitter until afterwards. And when I went on Twitter afterwards, everyone thought Manny Pacquiao won. And I couldn't figure it out. I just watched the fight. Jeff Horn battered this guy around the ring. The punch stats, which I didn't see until the next morning, are definitely in Pacquiao's favor. But he got marched down by the bigger man. He got beat around in the ring. And I had Jeff Horn winning that fight. I didn't understand the controversy there. And this is an inexperienced boxer, but he's taking a guy that's out of his prime. Manny Pacquiao ain't Manny Pacquiao anymore. And the young, bigger guy can get one over on the aging legend. Now, can Conor do that to Floyd? I do not think so. But could Nick Diaz get one over on an older guy? Could Nick Diaz beat Sugar Shane Mosley at 168 pounds at super middleweight? I don't see why not. It sounds crazy. Shane Mosley in his prime, one punch Nick Diaz, but he's not in his prime. He's not the same guy he used to be. There's shot, right? And I'm not saying I want to see a UFC fighter fight a shot boxer and see what happens. I just mean you can make this interesting. This is a spectacle event. No one's taking this seriously. How could you take this seriously? So go all out with it. Go all out. The Bellator didn't just put on Shamrock, Royce Gracie. Gotta go the extra mile. Give me Dada and Kimbo as well. Really load this thing up.
Well, the thing is, this fight's going to be so successful in August.
Yeah, you don't have to add anything. I get it.
Well, it's beyond that, though. You're telling me there's no promoters out there that are going to be trying to put together boxing versus MMA fighters coming out of this to try and just get a fraction of that success? 100% there's going to be MMA fighters out there that will they'll step up and take these fights in a heartbeat. That if you have two guys with some name value to it, I could totally see this being done again. I can't say necessarily the UFC will get involved again, but I think you're going to see tons of copycat promotions after this, putting together boxer versus MMA fights.
The thing is that there's just no name cachet there. And what I mean by that is look at one of Conor McGregor's training partners right now for this boxing match, Deshaun Johnson. Deshaun Johnson fought in the UFC. Ended up taking a pro boxing match, and the UFC was like, you can't do that. Cut him. But all the same, he's a UFC veteran. He's a guy that fought in MMA. He had an undefeated record prior to signing with the UFC in the first place. And now the guy's a pro boxer. And he's just a middle-of-the-pack pro boxer. Fabio Maldonado recently went back to his boxing roots. But all the same, it's just they're mid-class boxers. Could a promoter say to themselves, yeah, I want to go out and I want to sign UFC veterans that want to box? And are they going to get Joe Riggs and Cody McKenzie and Melvin Gillard and these guys on the card? Sure. But is there any interest there? Not likely. I mean, God forbid something tragic happens in the case of Tim Heck. I would not wish that on my worst enemy. I would not want to see that whatsoever. But when you start getting these promoters, copycat promoters, that just want to make a quick buck and they see this as something to market, that's when you got to be afraid of it. That's when it becomes an issue. And what I'm saying, is it an issue? Should Roy Jones be fighting? No, he actually should not be fighting. However, if he's fighting Anderson Silva, then really the risk is not quite there, you know? If he's taking on somebody around his level, the risk is not quite there. As we've seen with promotions that bring in these aging legends, there's always going to be a market for that aging legend, whether it's pro wrestling, whether it's any sport really. If you're a guy that used to have a big name, you're always going to have that big name. It's just we don't want to see that guy get hurt. We want to see him in a competitive matchup. Mayweather versus McGregor, I mean, because they're both big name guys, it's great and it's appealing, but it's not really a competitive matchup. So give me some other competitive matchups. You know, back in the day when a Chris Lytle and a Marcus Davis, when they were fighting, they had pro boxing experience, but realistically, were they any good at pro boxing? I don't know. Maybe this is the time to be able to see, could an adequate MMA striker go in there and hang with a boxer? I truthfully believe the answer is no. I would have to tell you, I think you take any top 10 guy in any weight class and there's physically no way he's losing to any MMA fighter. It's just the way it is. Could Stipe land a lucky punch on a heavyweight and knock him out? Yeah, absolutely. But if Stipe was to fight Derek Chisora, would I favor Derek Chisora? All day long. So there's just got to be levels to this. But there's a lot of question marks, and I don't want to see it happen one time where Floyd Mayweather goes out there, he knocks out Conor McGregor, and that's the last time you're ever going to see it. That's the last time you're ever going to hear about it. And then it's always going to be one of those, well, MMA, they like to wrestle around on the ground. Boxing, that's real fighting. No, man, it's supposed to be the other way around. My last point to this, Stipe, greatest comment I've seen in a long time on Twitter, is he says, I want to fight Anthony Joshua. I want to fight Anthony Joshua. And Anthony Joshua is, Stipe Miocic, uses the Conor line, who's that guy, right? I won't say the whole saying, but who is that guy? Stipe, he responds. He's like, I'm the consensus baddest man on the planet. You're not even the baddest man in the UK. And that really resonates with me. Stipe Miocic, if you were to pick one human being to represent planet Earth, the human race, right, in a fight to the death, we would pick Stipe. He's our consensus baddest man on the planet. Anthony Joshua would get taken down by Jared Rosholt and completely owned. Could he land a shot? Yeah, it's Jared Rosholt. But you get what I'm saying, right? So it's interesting to me. It's just people aren't seeing the full picture. They're just seeing one dimension of it, which is two guys throwing hands. Yeah,
I don't disagree with you. I feel that, you can look at this promotion and it's the fact that you have this built-in mega fight that I feel it's going to be very much, this is a showcase for the rest of our Mayweather fighters, and that's it. That's all being drawn upon the top.
It's all money team guys on the undercard. At least from what I've been seeing, what I've been hearing, it seems to be. My boy Gabe Rosado, though, he should be able to get a fight out of it, but yeah, outside of that, he'll be promoting his guys like he normally does, and I guess it is what it is, but I just feel like maybe they could have capitalized a little bit more. If you're really bringing in all these MMA fans, they'll watch the undercard. You know who watches undercards? MMA fans. MMA fans watch the prelims. MMA fans buy Fight Pass to watch the early undercard. You know who doesn't watch undercards whatsoever?
Everyone that's tuning in for the main event.
Yeah, well, just boxing fans in general, I mean, how many pay-per-views are sold on just the one singular fight? Whereas we're seeing a card this weekend that is not being sold on one singular fight. It's actually being sold on the fact that it has 5 good fights on it. That's the selling point. Not one single Jeff Horn versus Manny Pacquiao. I watched the fight this weekend. I can't even remember what the co-main event was. I don't even know. But everybody tuned in for that one fight. I don't even know that they televised the co-main event. It might have just been the one fight on ESPN. But all this, actually, you know what? That's a lie, because I watched Shea Mosley Jr. fight. Not do very good. All the same. It's not the same. MMA fans are rabid. They want to support the product. They want to consume it as much as possible. They want to get on the forum boards and they want to talk to each other. They want to discuss it. They want to send out memes. They want to send out GIFs. It's the new world. Boxing fans are not going on Twitter. You know what I mean? I'm just mean as a generality. They're not going out there. They're not trolling. It's just, it's a different time. Boxing's been around since the dawn of Earth, right? Once caveman walked out of his cave and saw another caveman across the way, he fought him. You know what I mean? It's just, boxing is one of the oldest sports ever. MMA is new. It's that new generation. And with that, you're seeing why it's the fastest growing sport. Because the fan base, the fan base is a new age fan base, and they're able to spread this information. They're able to spread this news. And Tim Hagg's GoFundMe, goes up, and then literally within a span of a week, it raises $50,000. That's just crazy. But that just goes to show you how the news spreads in this world, right? So maybe do a little something to cater to the MMA fans beyond just giving our guy, Conor McGregor, he's being fed to the land of the slaughter. He's going off right now as a 6.5 to 1 dog, but realistically, he's a 10 to 1 dog. So is that all we're getting, right? We're going to support the one guy? Come on, give me something else, right? Throw me a bone. I'm going to support it.
Well, this coming weekend, many bones will be thrown
yes,
to the MMA
absolutely.
fans. That's what I can say. I think there's some very good fights coming up on Friday and Saturday's card. That's going to bring an end to this show, but I want to thank Cody Saftic. You can follow him at CJ Saftic, and you can send him all of your comments this weekend about the fights and Jesse Taylor.
JT
if
money.
he prevails. Also want to thank Justin Gaethje for joining us. Of course, he's fighting Michael Johnson. Excellent fight that's coming up on Friday night. We are going to be off next week. We'll be back in 2 weeks. In the meantime, you can subscribe to the MMA Report with John Pollock on iTunes. You can follow either of us on Twitter. And we will speak with you after International Fight Week. Have a good weekend.